Welcome. Welcome. My name is George Arnold. I'm a volunteer at the Elcott Jewish Life Center. This is my abbreviated introduction. Those of you who've been here many times have heard it before. How many people are here for the first time? Put your hands up. Good. Welcome. We hope you enjoyed today and come back many more times. The Elcott Center is in its 17th year of operation and was built through a generous donation by Edith Everett and her family in memory of her beloved husband Henry. It's the home for all things Jewish on the Chautauqua grounds. Programs are free of charge and we have 5 rooms available for rent. Note that our programming and operations are dependent on your donations. We do not receive funding from the institution, and your gate pass fees do not support us. I invite you to join my wife and I in making a tax-deductible gift to support the mission of the Elcott Jewish Life Center. Contributions of any size are welcome. There are envelopes available in the front and on the side like this, and you can use a QR code or donate online. So many ways to help support us. Please take a minute to check your cell phones and make sure that any electronic devices are in the silenced mode so we're not interrupted. And now to introduce our speaker. We're lucky today to have Rabbi Shira Milgram. She reflects a generation of rabbis who passionately create extraordinary encounters with Jewish texts, rituals, and traditions that merge the intimate and personal with the grand vision of the Jewish people. She served as rabbi of Congregation Kol Ami for 37 years, building a community of activism, joy, and spiritual courage. She's a motivational speaker who offers Jewish meaning in a turbulent world with a new book soon to be published, The Sevenfold Path, A Traveler's Guide to Jewish Wisdom and Spiritual Practice. Rabbi Milgram is a graduate of Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, and his academic training in a wide range of learning. She has been a keynote speaker at major American conferences ranging from young leadership, women, and feminism to issues facing the aging and the elderly. She's also the editor of unique Siddur prayer book now used in settings across the continent. Her talk today will be on the Sevenfold Path, a traveler's guide to Jewish wisdom and a spiritual practice. So please welcome her to our podium.
Thank you, George. It is a privilege to be here at Chautauqua in the Elcott Center. It's our first time. Clearly, this is not just an intellectual and cultural center, but also a place of reverence at its core. And that makes it especially wonderful to be here. What I wanted most for my 50th birthday was to see the Northern Lights. So off we traveled to Alaska in February. We booked ourselves 4 nights in Talkeetna Lodge, a place that provided a Northern Lights watch. So you could go to sleep at night, and if the lights appeared, they would wake you up. Well, there were, in fact, high alerts every day for the Aurora Borealis, but the fog was so thick. All 4 days, we never saw them. But I wasn't upset. I was in a good place in my life. I took a picture of Northern Lights Boulevard sign, laughed, and somehow I was grateful for all that was, instead of unhappy for all that wasn't. And on a piece of stationery from Talkeetna Lodge, David, my husband, and I sketched out a skeletal structure for the Judaism we lived and loved. Walking the Sevenfold Path of Judaism, wholly ancient words for the 21st century. Nearly 25 years later, and 4 decades in the rabbinate, that skeletal structure has a body, but the soul remains the same. It's elements from that soul that I would love to share with you today. In spite of all the conflict and violence that religion has brought into the world, you can't wish religion away. religion won't go away ever. As we are writing and speaking and learning, religions are providing the fuel for inconceivable brutality and oppression. Religions are justification for taking away human and civil rights. They're used to validate racism, misogyny, and ethnic hatred. Indeed, murder is once again rationalized as doing God's will. Painful for us, so many of the policies of the State of Israel and its Jewish majority are no exception. It is now all the more essential to anchor ourselves in a Jewish wisdom of compassion and empathy, celebrating a diversity that honors the divine in all of life. The Judaism we love and practice, what we know and practice, is centered in love. And why won't religion go away ever? Religion in its purest, most spiritual forms is the way we name the mystery and the majesty of the world of which we're a part. It's the way we acknowledge the realness of spiritual energy, why we love in the face of death, why we hope in the face of despair, why we need our lives to matter. It's our conviction that we're not alone and that we share in and are connected to all of life. Some of you are here by yourselves, many of you are here with friends. I'd like you to think for a moment, since religion is, and we had the privilege of going to the worship this morning, but religion isn't only when you enter that incredible amphitheater for a formal worship service. Religion's right here. It's right here in and among us, inside of us. So I'd like you to think for a moment about something you do regularly. It could be every day, it could be once a week, once a month. Something you do that's regular, dependable, that gives meaning to your life. It doesn't have to be Jewish, doesn't have to be religious. Just something you do that's dependable and regular. And think about it for a moment. And if you would, turn to someone near you. If you don't know them, please introduce yourself. If you do know them, it may be something they don't know about you. Something you do regularly, dependably, that gives meaning. If you're sitting by yourself, when you see someone sitting alone, slide over and introduce yourself.
At my age, I think that sometimes I actually think it could be the last time.
No, but so I will make a point of going out of my way to watch the dog or something to walk on because like if it's a particularly nice evening or a nice day, whatever, I'll make a point to sort of go out of the way for because it's just very calming and meaningful to be. And particularly living in the city, it feels like it's closer to nature than I otherwise am.
That's one of my other rituals. I walk the dog.
Yeah.
Every day. About taking a selfie.
Yeah.
It's not really, I don't look at myself as much as others. But it's that it's there, so I
I'm going to interrupt. I had to go outside for a minute because it's too quiet out there. You're out there, you're part of this too. So the way the book is structured is it's called the Sevenfold Path. 7 aspects of life that are really important. Each of them is grounded in a Jewish value, and the value is sometimes understood differently. So these are the subjects, and I'm going to share with you a few moments from them. So a life on purpose, not for purpose, a life on purpose. You were alive for a reason. This one is grounded, as David spoke yesterday, in Selim Elohim, the divine spark. A life of connection, learning to love, anchored in Brit. Not always understood that way. So taking traditional Jewish concepts and understanding them differently. The third is tshuva, which we understand as a life of inner growth, the courage to become you. A life of wonder, kedusha, nourishing a heart of gratitude. Makom, presence, a life of openness. We are not alone. Tzedakah, a life of response, reaching beyond the self. Each of these anchored in foundational Jewish texts. The seventh is Shabbat, heaven on earth, a life of joy. So for some in the Jewish community, practices and values are anchored in legal decisions in the halakhic framework. Our way is not in that way. Our way is through stories, personal stories and sacred stories. When I was a child, I think maybe, I'm guessing like 8 or 9 years old, and I grew up in Virginia, and every other year, my parents would put the 4 of us into the station wagon and drive down to Miami, where my mother grew up and where her mother and aunt lived. So it was a long 2-day trek to Florida. So I have a dream when I was young. It takes place in Miami, on the beach. And I'm on the beach, again as a maybe 8, 9-year-old, and this is before there were aquariums with glass, huge glass walls and all that stuff. And in the dream, the ocean starts with a wall. It's not falling down, but it starts with a wall of water, just like that. And I can see jellyfish and people's legs, they're swimming in the water. And as I'm looking, I see one of my brothers swimming, and he's drowning. He didn't drown. He's drowning. And I look up on the beach, and I see my family on a picnic blanket eating. No one sees him, and I can't find my voice. And I can't let anybody know. So I remembered that dream. I wasn't aware that I remembered it, but it came back to me when I was a parent. And I understood then that the dream was true. I didn't understand it as a child. No, my brother wasn't drowning, but yes, he was. But my brother was drowning in another way, and something in me saw it, and I didn't have the power or the words to let my family know, and no, they didn't see it. I tell you that story because if someone were to have told me as a child, or at any time, that dream isn't true. Oceans don't start like that, they all you see is the surface, they get deep underneath, they don't start like that. And my brother wasn't drowning. If they had told me the dream wasn't true, is that right? The dream isn't true, but did the dream have truths in it? Yes, tremendous truths. And so the way we look at Torah is that way. We look at Torah as the record of sacred dreams. The Torah speaks in the language of dreams. And sometimes we get caught up. No, the sea doesn't split like that, and bushes don't burn and stay alive, and the world wasn't created in 7 days. It's not true. If we look at sacred stories in that way, we miss what they're really about. And what they're really about is carried in the language of dreams. The Zohar, the central work of Jewish mysticism, teaches, if you look at the garment of Torah, and you think that is the real Torah, woe to you. And if you look at the parchment, and you think that is the real Torah, woe to you. And if you look at the stories of the Torah, and you think that is the whole Torah, you have missed the whole thing. It's perhaps like looking at a person. If you look at her or him and you see only the clothing or the jewelry and you think that's the whole person, woe to you. And if you think it's the hair color or the skin or the voice, again, you have missed the person. Sacred stories deal with the great passages of time and life, the transitions from childhood to old age, birth, death, marriage, and personal transformation. Religion, each in its own way, addresses the one question that science does not. For what purpose? For what purpose was the universe created? For what purpose is there life? Religion comes to ask, why am I alive? It's a question we cannot afford to live without. So today, a few stories. This is a little story, it's not even mine. Once when we were teaching in Palm Springs, a woman we met described a time she was walking down Fifth Avenue, New York. Walking toward her was a beautiful woman, and in her description, beautifully dressed and beautifully coiffed. So she said, it's not my style to stop anybody on the street, but I just had to stop that woman and tell her, you look so beautiful. And the woman said, I'm going through chemotherapy, I have cancer. I'm going through chemotherapy, and my family told me I've never looked better. But I didn't believe them until you stopped and told me. Sometimes we know we've affected someone in an important way. In this case, who knows, perhaps a turning point in that woman's recovery from cancer. It could happen to any of us. Sometimes we're privileged to know the power of a small act, but most of the time we don't. You don't know what small thing you do what impact it might have somewhere else. There is no act that need be trivial. We are each alive for a reason. Even what seems meaningless and irrelevant is not without meaning. When our third child, Jerome, was in college in upstate New York, he decided he wanted to study, instead of where he was, he wanted to study mysticism with an amazing professor in New York City. And so he got permission from this professor to audit his classes. He could audit all week long. He got all of his courses, I'm not even going to name the college, all of his courses on one day at his registered school, slept on a couch for that one day in a friend's apartment, and Jeff Luke had just opened a new route for $39 or $49 one way from Syracuse to New York City, and he had everything lined up except he needed a place to stay in New York City, studying mysticism that one semester. And they looked at ads, and you could sleep in somebody's bathtub. It was an impossible time. And there really was someone who said, I'll sleep in the bedroom, I'll sleep in the bathtub, you can rent the bedroom. It was crazy. And then a friend of ours said, who manages buildings in New York City, said, I have a building managing which has been scheduled for demolition. There's one unrented apartment in the building, and you can have it as long as you sign the waiver that you'll leave on 2 days' notice. I'm not allowed to rent it, but I can just give it to you for free. You just have to sign a waiver that if the building is actually going to be demolished, you will leave it in 2 days. So Yaron met the building super and filled out the forms. And the super looks at the form, and his name, it says, are you Yaron Wilbur Elcott? He said, are you related to David Elcott? Yaron said, that's my father. And the man said, well, many years ago, I went to a class he taught. It was in Florida, and the man said, to tell you the truth, I don't remember anything he said. But I do remember that there was a break during the day I went out, I walked along the beach, and he was there with one of his kids. And he was playing with one of his kids there on the beach. And I could tell from the way he was playing with this kid that nothing else mattered to him at that moment. He was there. The man said, thought about that day all the time. He said, now, he said, I have 3 kids of my own. Pulled out his wallet, showed Yaron the pictures of his 3 kids, and he said, I think about that day on the beach. Every day, I always wanted to be a father like that with my children. So, of course, Yaron couldn't wait to call David to tell him. He calls David, and David says, I remember that conference. It was the worst thing I ever did. The conference was a total disaster. And then he said, you know, sometimes you think, like this is the main show, and you don't realize that actually the main show is someplace else. And that's what really counts. So for me, this is one of the most important lessons of faith. Under more normal circumstances, David would have had the same life-changing impact on this man's life and subsequently his children's lives, but never known it. So this is faith. It's to go to sleep at night thinking perhaps that nothing exceptional happened that day, that it was just another day, or maybe even a lousy day. But to know, to believe that when we act from our center, from a place of focus, of genuine presence, of love, that somehow that goes where it needs to go. Most of the time, we will never know it. That boy on the beach, by the way, was you. The beginning of faith is to know that beyond the fragmented pieces of our lives, there is a whole, a pattern where all the pieces fit together. We have a prayer for that. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohim, Adonai Echad. It is one. Perhaps you know of a time when you were in the right place at the right moment. I don't know if we have time for that right now to share, but you might want to think about whether you have a moment like that. Undoubtedly, you do. And perhaps we'll take some moments to share that later. So back to the Northern Lights. Returning from Israel for my father's 80th birthday via London, the pilot's voice came over the loudspeaker, explaining that significant storm activity was happening over the Atlantic, and the plane would have to be diverted, this is winter time, would have to be diverted from a direct route across the Atlantic up to the edge of the Arctic Circle and then across and down again. Everyone on the plane groaned. I, thinking, okay, this is winter, edge of the Arctic Circle, maybe. And so I sat up in my seat. And indeed, first the plane went north. As soon as it turned west and headed across the edge of I was sitting on the right side of the plane, right in every word, every meaning of the word. As soon as the plane turned, there they were. The light started. First with those beautiful greens, and then in these amazing curtains of white light, fringed in red. And I was weeping. And I was absolutely weeping. Those beautiful curtains of light, hanging from the top of the heavens, blowing across the sky in some invisible wind, fringed in red. I fell onto the floor, and there's not a lot of space in economy between the chair and and the tray table, and just wept in gratitude and in prayer. Centuries ago, the Kabbalists of Tzfat wrote a meditation for putting on the tallit, for putting on the prayer shawl. Their meditation draws from the book of Psalms. It reads like this. I want to say that was the text this morning, the opening text in the prayer service. Baruchi nafshi et Adonai, from Psalm 104. Bless the eternal, O my soul. The next line, you wrap yourself in light as with a garment. You stretch out the heavens like a curtain. So you do that, You stretch out the heavens like a curtain, you wrap yourself in light, you say that, and then you wrap yourself in the tallit. I vowed at that moment, kneeling on the floor of the plane, that I would wrap myself in the tallit every morning, and I would recall this gift of life and wonder. I learned in that moment, and subsequently, something I had not understood before, and that is the experience of God's faithfulness. I learned that God is faithful. That is, that the potential for wonder is there all the time. And I learned that I'm the one who isn't always faithful. At some point I realized that I had stopped putting on the tallit. I had stopped feeling that sense of obligation every morning to give thanks for the gift of my life and for life itself. We owe a huge debt for the gift of our lives, and feeling the obligation to acknowledge it helps shape a religious life, a spiritual soul. By nurturing our faithfulness, it also brings us back to a gift of wonder. Faithfulness, fidelity. Fidelity is a quality of character. We were having conversations yesterday about faithfulness. Several years ago, the Jewish Week asked couples married 40 years of marriage or more to share their secrets on keeping their marriage faithful and listening. One man said, "Ethel and I have been married 47 years, and two secrets have kept our marriage going. Since we were first married, we have made it a practice to go out twice a week for a romantic dinner with candlelight, champagne, and dancing. Ethel goes out on Tuesdays, and I go out on Fridays." Cultivating fidelity and commitment isn't easy. Faithful is to commit myself to something larger than myself, something beyond how I feel at this or that moment. In Jewish religious vocabulary, faithful translates as mitzvah, something you do out of a sense of commitment. Shabbat is such a faithful mitzvah. In our life, growing up, Shabbat has meant holding our children, each child, blessing them and kissing them, cultivating faithfulness. Every Shabbat of our marriage, at the Friday evening table, David has held me and sung to me in the words of our tradition. He wrote a melody. He's also very musical. He uses the words of the tradition and wrote a melody. I also responded. I don't do it at Friday nights. It feels like a little like Romeo, Juliet, whatever. Operetta doesn't feel so good. I'm not musical. I used a melody that I love and wrote my own words. And so every Friday night, David has held me and sung to me. There were times, particularly in our early years, when we were so tired and hassled, and the days were so busy and crazy, that we didn't take the time to tell each other that we loved one another. And there were weeks that I felt ignored, and that David's work or the children's needs were more important to him than me. And when he held me on Friday night and sang to me, I would think to myself, why is he holding me and singing to me? Everything else in his life is more important than me. His kids, his colleagues, his work, his sister. And what I would find was that in his holding me, I would remember our love. I would remember the loving person that I wanted to be. And if our tradition didn't have Friday night, if those words were not a faithful commitment, a mitzvah of our Shabbat, would David tell me on Friday night, each Friday night, that he loved me, even if he were angry, even if he too felt ignored, even if he didn't feel like it? Love is critical, but faithfulness brings us back when love falters. A life of mitzvah, of commitment, helps to nurture faithfulness. Our daughter Talia meets her best friend every Thursday morning, rain or shine, for a morning walk. They put their kids on the bus to school and spent an hour walking together. We were moved by this simple and powerful practice. Key ingredients: faithfulness, stick to it. Regularity, same time, predictable. Enduring, it's not a one-time event. You're in it for the long haul. Sustainable, make it something you can do. The more you stay with it, the more it will give you, and the more it will bless you. The courage to become you on healing and return. We know the story of the 10 Commandments. Golden calf, Moses shatters the 10 Commandments, comes up with a new set. The Midrashic tradition in the Talmud asks, what happened to the first set of the commandments? And they were so holy. They were like God's words inscribed on those tablets. Again, we're thinking the language of dreams, the language of symbols. What happened to the first set of tablets? And the Talmudic texts, in a few words, says, the shattered ones and the whole ones were stored in the ark. In 1920, our children's great-grandmother received a beautiful crystal punch bowl as a wedding gift. It was a one-of-a-kind hand-cut piece, later valued at $10,000. I'm telling you that you should know it's really a special bowl. Mutti, like her family, for the preceding 5 centuries, lived in Germany. By the late 1930s, the grip of Nazi rule began to tighten around her life. But she was reluctant to leave her country and her home, for what a home it was. Mutti had overseen the construction of this beautiful 4-story home in every detail. One day in November of 1938, Mutti's older daughter, Ruth, then a teenager, had an uneasy premonition. Ruth is my husband's mother, my beloved mother-in-law. So she had this premonition. She convinced her parents and her younger sister to leave the house. They were all hidden separately in the homes of faithful Christian friends. Before she herself left, she pushed a large armoire into the end of a stair landing, creating behind it a false closet. She hid there the 2 most precious things for her and her family, her personal diaries and the crystal bowl. The date was November 9th, 1938. That night was Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, as organized riots of Nazi Germans destroyed synagogues and Jewish-owned businesses all over Germany. When the rioting subsided by the morning of the 10th, Ruth would still not let her family go home. That uneasy feeling hadn't left her. And indeed, it was the following night that their home was destroyed. But they didn't know. Ruth returned home alone on the 3rd morning. And as she rounded the corner of the street on her bicycle, she saw from a distance the front door of their home in the middle of the street. As she got closer, she could see water pouring out of the windows of each of the 4 stories. Nazis had climbed up, stopped up all the drains, turned on the faucets, and as she slowly climbed the chairs, she saw the family portraits that lined the staircase, slashed, knives pierced through hearts and eyes of the generations of her family. But they hadn't found her diary or the crystal bowl. The crystal bowl followed Mutti and her family on their escape route from Germany to England to Chicago and finally to Los Angeles. When Mutti died in 1990, the crystal bowl passed to her first grandchild, my husband's sister Diane, who lives in Northridge. Diane had always loved this bowl and treasured it not as her own, but knew that it was in her safekeeping to preserve for all of Mutti's generations still to come. 4 years later, an earthquake hit Los Angeles, centered in Northridge. David, in a quirk of fate, heard about the earthquake as it was happening and got a call through to his sister before all the phone lines went down. He could hear the pictures falling down from the walls, windows shattering, glass flying. It was like another Kristallnacht. And Diane was hysterical. Mochi's bowl. Mochi's bowl is all she could scream. David kept saying, you're all right, nothing else matters. But Mochi's bowl had fallen and broken into 100 pieces, and Diane was inconsolable. The city of Los Angeles began to clean up, trucks circling through the neighborhood, picking up huge piles of debris and construction debris stacked outside of homes. But Diane kept the pieces of the crystal bowl. I don't know about you, I would have thrown them out. She kept the pieces. One night she had a dream and awoke, knowing what she needed to do. On her own, she commissioned an artist friend to make a sculpture of Mochi. After studying photographs and videos, the artist molded a clay form of Mochi and then poured 14 bronze statues, one for each of Mochi's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. When they were finished, Diane presented them to her family. Mochi is seated on a stool, the old lady with her hands in her lap. And each statue placed in her hands is a piece of the crystal bowl. Just because something breaks and shatters into pieces doesn't mean that it's over. Part of healing our lives is the faith that we are part of something bigger. Broken dreams, failures, disappointments, struggles, pain, and suffering. We can take the broken pieces of our lives and create from them something new, a legacy of love that will be for the generations. Shema Yisrael is followed by, these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. You know those words. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, what sense does that make? What should the Torah have said? Take these words which I command you this day and place them in your heart. What good do they do on your heart? Why doesn't the Torah say place them in your heart? It's al livlecha, on your heart. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, sometimes our hearts are too hardened, and we don't want any of this stuff. So sometimes we take these loving and broken things, sometimes we take them, these words of encouragement or support, and we put them, just leave them there. And sometimes when our heart breaks, in a moment of heartbreak, they'll be there. In a moment of heartbreak or openness, they'll fall right in. And so they teach the Hasidic wisdom, there is nothing as whole as a broken heart. Okay, I have one more. One more story. This is on your power to bless. Jacob was on his deathbed. He called his son Joseph to his side, holding Joseph and his sons close. Jacob lifted his hands and placed one on each of his 2 grandchildren and blessed them. The God in whose ways my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who's been my shepherd from my birth to this day, the angel who has saved me from harm, bless these 2 lads, and may my name be recalled in them. Then he instructed them, saying, I'm about to be gathered to my kin. Bury me with my fathers and mothers in the cave which is in the land of Ephron, in the land of Canaan. When Jacob finished his instructions to his sons, he drew his feet into his bed, and breathing his last, he was gathered to his people. And Joseph, he buried his father as his father had wished in the land of Canaan, Israel. He returned to Egypt, where he lived to see children of the 3rd generation. At length Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die. God will surely take notice of you and bring you up from this land to the land God promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And when God has taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here. The Torah records the stories of our founding families, the conflicts, the deceptions, the loves and anguish, the births and the deaths. And in these stories, that close the book of Genesis, the Torah tells how the great patriarchs prepared for their dying. The Torah records the clear instructions they gave to their children. They each invoked the story of the generations that came before them, and each gave of their own blessings while entrusting to their children the unfolding of the future. There are many who at the threshold of death cannot bless those whom they leave behind. For some, death takes us suddenly. For others, the end of life robs us of the capacity to know or articulate our hopes for our deepest feelings. And for others, we're afraid to talk about our dying, and we miss the chance to say our blessing, to bestow upon those who survive us our deepest blessing. And so our religious traditions invite and encourage us, don't miss the chance. We will not live forever. And these are precious opportunities right now. We understand that it might spook us to talk about death. We fear that it might jinx us or compromise the quality and joy of our life right now. We don't want to talk about saying goodbye. But goodbye is built into the fabric of life. It doesn't matter when it happens. Bringing our first or last child to nursery school, taking leave of our parents or old friends, wondering if we'll ever see them again. Making the decision to move, closing the door on one part of our lives, opening a door to the next. Walking a child or grandchild down the aisle of a wedding. One more child off to college. We love with all our hearts, knowing all along we will have to say goodbye. And so in these joyous moments, our children spread their wings, 50th wedding anniversary, a new birth, and we are so happy. We are also crying. Why do we cry? Because we know it is so fragile, so fleeting, it is only here for a moment. Their life and ours, here but for a moment. In the years when our own children were already grown up, but before they were married, with children of their own, we found ways to be together, mother and son, father and children, as adults. With Noam, it was a week in Berlin, during the year that he was living and studying there. We shared the space of his studio, an intense week of immersion into his life in the city. The last night we were sitting on the floor of his apartment playing cards, when Noam suddenly spread a bunch of cards in his palm and said, "I've chosen a card." He said, "Tell me what card it is." I looked at him like, "Are you kidding me?" "Concentrate," he said. "I'm focusing on it, so concentrate." I did. I ventured. The 2 of spades. He turned the card around. The 2 of spades. "Now you do it," he said. "Can't we just quit while we're ahead?" I said. "No, you do it." So I spread out my hand, I chose the card and focused on it. "Easy," said Noam. The Queen of Hearts. We were in perfect sync. Timeless, without age or generation, a moment out of time. And then I remembered that I was going to say goodbye. And in an instant, I was again the mother. Saying goodbye is what we do. We love with all our hearts, knowing all along we will have to say goodbye. Here's the craziness. Let go of it and you will have it. Like the kids' song, hold on to love and you won't have any. Hold on to spiritual power, claim it for yourself, you have none. Share it, give it away, it will be part of you. It's not only love we hold on to, we hold on to anger. We hold on inside to those who hurt us, refusing to forgive them, thinking we have the power over them as long as we refuse to give them pardon. But we have no power until we let it go. As long as we live in fear of dying, we will not be able to live. A few years ago, the synagogue received a call from someone outside the Colombia community who wanted to know if I could help with the impending funeral of a friend. At the time, I couldn't. Would I be willing to talk with her? Yes, I said. The phone call came in. We were connected. I turned away from my computer screen, closed my eyes, and listened. It was easier for me to listen that time than usual. I had no preconceptions, no baggage. I didn't know what she looked like. We had no history. I had no agenda. I just listened. She was expecting to die within a few days. Why the call? She was furious at her family of origin. They had not spoken for decades. Should she speak to them before she died? She wanted to know. Should she take that risk? There must have been some crime, some act of violence, some irreparable damage. I imagined terrible things, but then I really couldn't imagine. I said to her, I have no judgment about your anger. I do not know what your family did to you. I'm sorry for the pain you bear. I have no judgment, I repeated, on whether you should or shouldn't reach out. Only if you do, who knows what impact your reaching out might have long after you die. There was only one question I knew in that moment to ask. Do you want to die with this anger? I asked her. She answered in a flash, no. After that, she needed no help, no advice. I wouldn't have known what happened next, but as the way the world turns, her funeral ended up at my synagogue. I learned that she had been gay and had loved and lived with a woman for decades. Her family had rejected her. It's hard to imagine how our hearts have changed and opened for so many of us only in the past few decades. She grew older, never speaking with her brothers or parents, never meeting her nieces and nephews. She chose to reach out to her family. I learned that she had died with her nieces and nephews all around her in her bed, and her brothers vowed to carry on her legacy of openness and inclusion. We think that the end of our lives represents only loss and diminishment. There is an unbelievable power at the end of our life, concentrated power that will last forever in the lives of those we leave behind. When I was a second-year student at HUC, writes Shira Stern, I began volunteering at Memorial Sloan Kettering, focusing on pediatrics, although I covered other floors when the need arose, especially when other chaplains were away. One particularly cold winter Friday, I was preparing to go home to make Shabbat when I noticed a mislaid request for candles and wine to be delivered to a patient's family. Someone should have taken care of this. Will they even be there if they are Shabbat observant? I wrestled with myself. Gathering wine, challah rolls, and electric lights, I made my way to the room where a middle-aged woman was sitting just outside of the door. In broken English, she thanked me for coming in, and when I responded in French, she began her story. They were recent immigrants from Syria and had traveled from the other side of the world to make a better life for their 2 teenage boys, buying into a business with the husband's brother. 2 months later, her husband was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer, and he was given little hope of recovery. She cried when she said this, cried harder when she wondered how to raise fatherless children, and wailed because she felt so alone. All the unsaid words a couple might share over a lifetime needed to be articulated now, but her husband had been semi-comatose for days. It was too late. Her 2 sons, sitting in chairs on either side of the bed, were studiously ignoring our conversation. I suggested we usher in Shabbat together, so I set up the lights on the bedside table, poured the wine, covered the rolls with a clean towel, and then drew the privacy curtain around us. Rivka asked that I leave, while she held on to her husband's feet. I sang softly so as not to disturb the quiet in the room. As I lifted the Dixie cup to chant Kiddush, the patient lifted his hands and placed one on each boy's head, reciting both the traditional blessing for sons, the blessing of Jacob for his grandchildren, as well as Yivarechecha, may God bless you and watch over you. His wife stood stunned, unable to move. When I began to sing, the man sang with me quickly and without missing a beat. When it was over, every one of us was in tears, and I left them to savor the moment. By the time I had reached the lobby, the man had died. Jacob was on his deathbed. He lifted his hands and placed one on each of his grandson's head. Someday, he said, all of Israel will bless their children as I bless you now. There is incredible power always to bless those around us. So I'd like to invite you, take a moment. You have the power to bless always. There are moments in which it's consecrated, but you have that power. So I invite you, if you would, to reach out, put your arms around the person next to you.
Oh.
And I invite you to say after me with the Hebrew and English. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and watch over you. May God bless you and watch over you. Ya'ir Adonai Panav Elecha v'yechunecha. May the light of God's grace shine on you. Yisa Adonai Panav Elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God be with you. And bless you with peace.
Anybody have any questions?
The great stories are not out there. I just want to remind you the stories are yours. We have them. Yes, you have a question.
Well, I know people have a hard time believing and with religion, and there's a line that I always think of that the Jews, Israelites said when they got the commandments, that Na'aseh v'nishma, that we'll do it and then we'll hear it, and that we'll just do it and see what happens. And I kind of use that as not just a motto for religion, but for everything. And that's kind of how I deal with not necessarily believing all the time, but with struggling.
Thank you so much. It really helps. We do that sometimes. Yes.
There is Jewish humor around there. I'll make a quick comment and I'll tell you a death story. We live in an unreal world. People used to bury their own relatives. You were in touch with people. If you went on a whaling voyage, you were gone for 3 or 4 years. People wrote letters back to relatives, not knowing if they were alive or dead, healthy or ill. But there was a man who loved his wife's brother. She was a marvelous baker. I don't know if anybody knows this story. It's around. And he's on his deathbed and he smells the flavor of the baking going on. And he says, Rivka, please, I would like to have one of your rubla before I go. She says, I'm sorry, it's
Yes. It's wonderful. Yeah, we do have a lot of good jokes. We do. I'll spare you some of the ones I know.
Anybody else?
And I hope the day is filled with blessing of all kinds for you. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, that's fine.